أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والمرسلات عرفا فالعاصفات عصفا والناشرات نشرا فالفارقات فرقا فالملقيات ذكرا عذرا أو نذرا إنما توعدون لواقع رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم ما بعد. Once again everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today in these few minutes I want to share with you some interesting things about a particular literary feature of the Quran, oaths in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal takes oaths in many surahs, sometimes in the beginning and sometimes even in the middle of surahs. And it's good to understand the function of this kind of piece of the Quran before we dive into one example that's particularly unique, Surah Al-Mursalat, the 77th surah of the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal takes oaths in ways similar that we take oaths. Oaths are taken typically by people when they're testifying in court. Oaths are taken when somebody doesn't believe you, like, I swear. I swear to God that really happened. You swear by usually something more important than yourself, and you identify that as a means of validating your claim. So when somebody's skeptical towards what you're saying, you might take an oath. When you're going to testify, you might take an oath. It might even be a statement of anger in some cases. I swear you better stop what you're doing right now, like things like that. So you can take an oath in that context as well. The Arabs back in the day used the oaths for different reasons in addition to what I just explained to you. They would actually use the oaths as a means of garnering somebody's attention. So if there's a bunch of people sitting and talking and you just want to grab everybody's attention. Nowadays we say things like, listen up, and then everybody kind of stops talking and listens to the person. But they would actually swear by something, and by swearing by something, call everybody's attention towards themselves. So they'll say, I swear by the morning. And that would actually, so it's supposed to send the message that something important is going to happen in the morning. We better listen to this guy because he's got a special news alert about what's coming in the morning, right? So this was a means of getting attention. The Quran, if you were to take an overview, the Quran uses the oaths as a means of getting your attention. That's certainly the case. And it's also there to mentally prepare you for a message that is about to be given. So it's actually, the oath itself is not the subject matter. It's actually a means, an object that leads you to a conclusion. Let me put that in simple words. You don't find normally a person coming up to you and saying, I swear to God, and then walking away. I swear to God, you were going to say something beyond that. You're emphasizing what you're about to say. So the oath or the swear itself is not your point. Your point was coming thereafter, right? So when you read oaths in the Quran, they're actually building up to a point, and they're necessarily connected to that point. And so the Quran uses some pretty interesting and unique oaths. And a lot of times the oaths are used to actually paint a picture. And one such oath is Surah Al-Mursalat. So Allah says, وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا, and so he said basically, I swear by those that have been released or those whose manes have been released. And this is, lots of commentaries found about this. What I find most convincing as a depiction of وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا from a language point of view, mursal is an ism maf'ul, which means that which has been let go. Something that has been let go. So a small band of something that's been let go. And the word urf is actually used for many things in Arabic, including the hair on the back of a horse's mane. Like, when you're riding a wild horse, you don't have a saddle. You have the hair to grab onto. And so this is actually an image of wild horses, that some people are riding wild horses and they're out of control and they're holding on to their hair and yanking the hair on the back of their necks, their urf, to basically pull the brakes on them. But then imagine when those brakes are let go. When you let go of that hair, the horse is going to run wild in any direction it feels. And this is actually a parable drawn in the Quran between horses that are let go and unleashed and winds. Because the Arabic language also uses the word winds, or mursalat for winds. And so the parallel is drawn between winds and wild horses that have been unleashed. Basically, Allah through it is describing kind of like tornado type winds or crazy wild winds that are going in, basically gusting in every direction. And therefore you see that image build further when in the next ayah using the letter fa. فَالْعَاصِفَاتِ عَصْفًا. When you see a fa in the oaths as opposed to a wa in the oaths, it actually means it's building on the same image. So what is that next image? It uses the word asf. And the Arabic word asf, simply put, is basically not being considerate of what is in your path. Imagine a train or a tank or something, and it doesn't care what is in its path. It just marches on and crushes through anything without any consideration. The idea is these winds, once they're let go, just like those wild horses, trample over anything, crush anything in their path, and have no consideration whatsoever. So Allah swears by this incredible, tornado, storm, this kind of image, or a wild horse image, and parallels those two to paint basically so far one very particular picture, that winds have the power to destroy. Winds have the power to create, indiscriminate kinds of death and destruction around, wherever they go. And they don't care if it's a nice person or a bad person, or there's a good person in the car or the bad person in the car. It's going to flip their cars over anyway, or destroy buildings and homes anyway when it hits. So that's one side of the image. You'll notice in the next ayah there's a wa, وَالنَّاشِرَاتِ نَشْرًا. So what that means is a new picture is being painted. And this time he says, and I swear by those that distribute thoroughly. Nashr is actually to distribute, to sprinkle. And Allah is talking about how rains distribute clouds, or rather winds distribute clouds. They distribute pollen. They distribute even dirt or dust. But that distribution that they do, that the winds do, they're responsible for bringing the rain and also for producing much of the life on the earth. So now we're actually getting a completely different image of the winds. So the first two ayat painted a picture of the winds as a means of death and destruction. And now Allah is saying that those same winds, when they're calm, they're also ones that distribute life and create the very opposite of death and destruction around the earth. And then he says, فَالْفَارِقَاتِ فَرْقًا, and they make very precise distinction. In other words, when you take imagine a bunch of seeds in your hand and you kind of just throw them like that. They spread in every which direction and there's no calculation of where they're going to fall. But when Allah sends winds, every drop of rain and every little piece of pollen that falls, it's going to fall exactly where Allah wants it to fall. They're going to make very, very clear distinction about which lands are going to get drought and which lands are going to be replenished with water and which lands are going to get even flooded and which lands are going to get the pollen and which lands are not going to get the pollen, which plants will germinate and which plants won't. This is فَالْفَارِقَاتِ فَرْقًا. So Allah is saying, just like the destruction is indiscriminate on the one hand, but actually the life of it is actually the life that it gives is very particular and very well distributed. And so far you've got these two very contradictory pictures of wind, and Allah swears by all of them. But then he builds on both of these images and says something kind of unexpected. And this is a unique and very beautiful feature of the Quran, that Allah will take physical images, He'll paint physical images with words, and then He will draw attention to a spiritual reality. He does this over and over again in the Quran. Whether He's talking about birds or mountains or trees or the sky or whatever else, you'd think He'd just be talking about the sky, but He'll use the sky to talk about something that has to do with you and me and our personal and spiritual life. So He does that here again. He talked about these two different kinds of wind, and then He builds on it by saying, فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. So beautiful. Then they bring into contact with reminder. Meaning they bring all kinds of people. Doesn't matter, and there's no maf'ul bihi from mulqiyat. They bring believers, disbelievers, any human being that wishes to ponder. They've now been brought into contact with a reminder. The idea of being brought into contact with a remembrance or with a reminder is the idea of a person receiving revelation. Like we say, these people haven't even been brought into contact with the Quran, with Allah's words. Right? We have to bring that word to them. فَلْيُبَلِّغِ الشَّاهِدَ الْغَائِبِ, like the Prophet ﷺ said in his farewell address, let those who are present deliver it to those who are not present. But Allah is saying something incredible in this ayah. He's saying those, if you were to ponder over the wind, then they are delivering a reminder to you all on their own. Like you sit in a Jumu'ah khutbah or sermon and you're being reminded. Allah is saying actually that's one kind of reminder, but winds, if you were to ponder, on their own are a sermon by themselves. They are a khutbah by themselves. They are a powerful reminder by themselves. So how in the world are winds a reminder? Winds are a reminder on the one hand of how much Allah has spared us. Allah is holding on the reins of this wild horse. And the fact that you feel a nice breeze when you walk out of the house, and you say, wow, it's a nice day, the air is really moving, is actually Allah holding back something that is meant originally to destroy. This thing, its destructive capacity is mentioned first. And so Allah is reminding you and me that in fact He's allowing the earth not to fall into destruction at the hands of winds. And sometimes He lets them loose a little bit just to remind you and me of what He's capable of. In the original context of this surah was the Quraysh. And these people, they used to make fun of the Quran. And they used to tell the Prophet ﷺ, oh yeah, you're giving us all these warnings. You and what army? Who's going to take us on? All the tribes of Arabia are afraid of us, and you're going to stand alone and challenge us, our power? Well, I don't see any people behind you that are going to bring us down. And Allah basically saying very softly in these words, He doesn't need an army to bring you down. He can just unleash winds. You could be the most advanced nations in the world. When the wind is unleashed, there's nothing you can do. There's nowhere you can hide. There's no way you can save yourselves. Allah will describe nations before, upon whom when winds came, and before that they were the most powerful of nations, when winds came. سبع ليال وثمانية أيام حسوما فترى القوم فيها صرعى كأنهم أعجاز نخل خاوية فهل ترى لهم من باقية. You saw 7 days and 8 nights of continuous hurricane, tornado. Man, when one of those things hits for 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I live in Texas. They land here all the time. And when they land into a residential neighborhood, you can't recognize that was ever a house. It's just rubble. It's just rubble. And pieces of it are miles away from the house. And that's for 2 minutes. Allah has brought winds like that down for 7 continuous days. And He says, these look like, أعجاز نخل خاوية. The people look like ripped up pieces of palm trees. فَهَلْ تَرَى لَهُم مِّن بَاقِيَةٍ. Did you see anybody left behind? Did you see anybody survive? So when we feel the niceness of the wind, it's actually a reminder of how much Allah holds back His punishment, and how much Allah has created these powerful destructive things, but He subdues them and submits them like a wild horse is domesticated. And not only is a wild horse domesticated, it's actually put to your, not only is it not attacking you, it's actually serving you. And so these winds then serve you and provide you and provide you. And that's yet another very powerful reminder. On the one hand, about Allah sparing us and allowing our transgressions to go. But on the other hand, Him continuing to feed us, continuing to provide us. What an incredible reminder for all human beings. There are people who believe in God and people who don't believe in God. There are people who curse God. There are people who refuse to pray to Him. There are Muslims who question the Quran and even make fun of the Prophet ﷺ and still call themselves Muslim. There are people of all manner. Allah knows what they say and how they feel and what they do. And yet He doesn't withhold from them, as a result of their defiance and their rebellion. He doesn't hold the winds back from them and the provision that the winds provide, the distribution of food and nourishment to the earth and therefore them. All of that is not put on hold because of their rebellion. I want to give you an example that a great scholar, Amin Ahsan Islahi, gave once about this concept. So powerful. He said, imagine you have a rabid, like a wild dog, and you're trying to tame this dog, and you feed it and it still bites you. Right? And it's just going at you. And you, as a cruel owner of that dog, you put the thing in a cage and you don't feed it and you don't give it anything to drink. It's just sitting in that cage out in the burning sun, tortured for day after day after day. Now it's dehydrated, it's completely, almost completely out of food, and it's just basically, every time before, when it was acting up, you bring your hand close, it's ready to bite. But now that it's on its death, it's completely humbled. Then you can basically take sips of water, put it in your hand and bring it close to the dog, and it will humbly drink. It will no longer have any cause for rebellion. Allah does not bring humanity to its knees so they can humble themselves before Him. He can. We could be like that dog that's acting up, and He can put us in our place, because no matter what we do, if He were to stop the winds from delivering the rains and delivering the food, then all of us will be put in humility. All of us will be in that state. So He says, فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. So not only is He sparing you, He continues to provide you despite your rebellion. That is just for someone who would just look outside and feel the wind and ponder, what has the wind done for them? What has the wind done for me? And so He says at the end of all of it, عُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا. By the way, He still hasn't made His point. Remember, the oaths are there to prepare you for a point. This is not even the point. This is just preparing you for the point. عُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا. One, عُذْر actually means a legitimate excuse. He says, I have sent the winds as a legitimate enough excuse. In other words, for every human being that was capable of pondering, that was capable of thinking. The fact that they can stand before Allah and still say there was nothing that ever warned me. There was nothing that ever gave me reason to pause or think or reflect or think about my purpose in life. I lived a life of heedlessness and purposelessness without any consideration because nobody ever came and told me anything. Basically, in one word, udhran, Allah is saying, I sent you winds, didn't I? That's enough of an excuse. That's on my end, the case is done. I gave you enough to make it for me to be absolved and say you received enough. It's actually above and beyond that Allah sent His message to help you contemplate the realities that were already around you. You know, udhran, and then He says, oh nudhra, or enough as a warning. These things are enough for someone who needs to be warned. They don't need to hear a scary sermon. They don't need to hear reminders of hellfire. They can just ponder over the world around them, and that'll be enough as a warning for them. Udhran aw nudhra. When He says all of that to put me in a certain state of mind, then He makes His point. And that point is now so easy to accept. إِنَّمَا تُوعَدُونَ لَوَاقِعٌ. Whatever you have been promised is bound to occur. No doubt about it, whatever you've been promised is bound to fall upon you. What is Allah saying? You think it's so impossible for the day of judgment to come, for the earth to shatter, and the graves to come, the dead to come out of their graves, and the sun and the moon to collapse into each other. All of this is fantasy to you. Well, you know what? It's not so fantastic. It's not such a fantasy that winds can unleash destruction. And the same power that controls those winds is the same power that uses the very same thing, wind itself, to produce death and to produce life. And He's the very same one who revealed this word, and this word has spread across the society, and this word will be a cause for some people's destruction, and the same word will be the cause for some people to be brought to life. Even while they live here, and you think that whatever you've been promised isn't going to happen. It absolutely is. Subhanallah, how Allah brings His revelation and the natural world around us together in His beautiful, beautiful kalam. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us people of pondering and reflection on the Quran, and actually as a result may He make us a people of pondering and reflection upon the world around us, and open our eyes to the reality, the beautiful reality, the guiding reality that Allah has created for us to not ignore. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.